If the water pump in your BMW is leaking at the metal gasket, in this video, I will show you how to replace it with a new one. If you have ever done this before, you know how hard it is to achieve full sealing on such a connection. And here, we will make sure that after the replacement, not a single drop of coolant escapes from this spot again. This guide will be suitable for the BMW models you see on the list right now, and in this video, you will see an E61 with the M57 engine, where the problem started with a leak at the gasket, which lasted 20 years anyway, and finally had every right to give up. We are going to fix that right now. First, I remove the engine acoustic cover and set it aside. Next, I unscrew the front bracket panel, a total of 10 Torx screws, and slide the whole thing to the side so that it does not get in the way. Next, I unscrew the plastic radiator fan lock, which is held by 5 screws, and pull this element out, making access to the radiator and the fan. I unplug the connector from the fan controller and from the power supply. I unclip and slide to the side the intake duct at the connection with the anti-shutter valve, because this will allow me to slide out the entire fan panel without any problem, without catching on any element along the way. I place a pan or a bottle under the car, and now I put a rubber hose onto the end of the coolant drain. I unscrew the cap to drain all the coolant. There will be about 5 liters of it. By tensioning this pulley through the bolt, I release the AC belt, which I can now easily remove without tearing it. You can check if the tensioner is working properly and if it isn't too loose, because it should sit really tight. In exactly the same way, I loosen the pulley tensioner to remove the serpentine belt. You can remove it completely or leave it partially wrapped around the pulleys to make putting it back on easier later. And here, a proper lever will be crucial, because everything is very tightly tensioned and you need to use a bit of strength. Now, I slide a piece of rag or some cardboard under the car, and I unscrew the clamp of the EGR cooler hose, which I unplug completely from the flange. I also disconnect the hose on the other side by the radiator to take it out completely. Next, I unscrew the 2 screws securing the air duct from the airflow sensor and completely remove the element to give myself more space to work. Now for a small inspection, you can see how wet it is near the pump. On a warm engine, every few seconds a drop of coolant drips from the leaking element, and that means a real risk of overheating the engine, which is why it absolutely must be sealed. Now, with a little help from a phone, camera, and flashlight, I line up my Allen key with the 4 pump screws and unscrew them to pull out the whole assembly along with the thermostat. Why? Unscrewing the thermostat on its own with such difficult access will take you a lot of time and frustration. So, it is easier to unscrew the entire thing with the pump right away, take it out together, and unscrew the thermostat only later. During the process, a lot of fluid will appear under the car, because until now it was blocked inside the engine by the pump and the closed thermostat. Before removing the components, I disconnect the thermostat from the rest of the cooling system, and now, slowly and carefully, I separate the pump from the engine block, making sure not to hit anything, especially the radiator fins. As soon as I manage to detach it, I pull the whole assembly out using the free space on the left side. After removing the water pump, the entire surface on the engine block looks more or less like this. Everything is dirty, greasy, and the gasket is still sitting rigidly in its place, refusing to come out without using force. After removing it, the cast iron itself looks like this, but we will fix this state of affairs in a moment so that it never leaks from this spot again. The old gasket and the old pump don't look the best. It's clear their glory days are long behind them. The pump still works, and generally everything is fine with it. But I managed to buy a new water pump with the same part numbers second-hand for $10. So to avoid coming back to this repair in another year or two, I'll replace it right away and I'll have the whole cooling system sorted out for years. I've already bought a new gasket, the same as the previous one, with the same markings matching this specific model. You need to know that this is one of the most difficult gasket installations because everything is wet, dirty, and greasy, which is why 90% of the success will depend on properly preparing the surface for the new seal. Without this, there is no chance of success. First, using a cotton cloth soaked in carbon deposit cleaner, I remove the first layer of dirt that has accumulated here over the last years. After half an hour of polishing, the result looks pretty much like what you see on the screen now. I will warn you right here not to do this with sandpaper because the metal gasket will leak later on. If the cloth alone isn't enough for you, here is Plan B, where you can see the result after another 15 minutes of polishing with a grey non-woven abrasive pad of 800 grit, ultra-fine type, and this is already a stage that completely satisfies me. In some places, you can still see a bit of dark residue, and you are probably wondering why I don't scrub it off. So let me explain. This is fluoroelastomer that fused into the engine block to seal the previous gasket, and by scrubbing it too hard by force, we could achieve the exact opposite of the intended effect. The new gasket will also be covered with a layer of this coating, and it will create something like a vulcanization effect, which I will tell you about later. Next, using a syringe and a small hose, I draw out some coolant from this spot, so that during the installation of the new gasket and any potential rocking of the car while tightening the bolts, no coolant leaks out. All of this is to ensure that the gasket bonds properly with the engine block, because everything should be dry during installation, and I will explain to you in the next step why. The second extremely important thing. After cleaning away all the grime, the surface to which we will be applying the gasket needs to be degreased very thoroughly. The same applies to the component we are going to seal. Its surface must also be cleaned and degreased. What kind of product should you use? There are many products on the market, but I personally use a silicone remover or a brake cleaner because the price is very good and the excess product evaporates very quickly. In addition to that, I use cotton swabs to dry out the bolt holes from any excess fluid that could interfere with properly tightening the new pump. And here is a huge request. Please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps with developing the channel. Thank you. Now for the crucial step. The engine block and the pump are cleaned, the surface is degreased and dry, so I put the whole assembly together with the thermostat into its place without screwing it in. While the part is resting loosely, I insert the gasket from the left side, being very careful not to damage or bend it, because a gasket of this type, once bent, is completely useless. On the screen, you can see now that I don't have the vacuum pump installed in my car, but you don't need to remove it in yours. I only took it off because I was recording a second video at the same time. Once you manage to get everything properly aligned, the next step is getting the bolts through the pump and the gasket so that everything sits evenly, and this will definitely not be the easiest task. You will have to play around with it for a while. If you're working in such a hard-to-reach spot, it's a good idea to ask someone to help with a phone, as the extra screen expands your field of view a bit and makes putting the bolts in much easier. This way, you can also make sure that everything has seated properly and fits together as it should. Next, I tighten the pump with a torque wrench according to the manufacturer's specifications, and then I clip the other end of the cooling hose onto the radiator flange, securing it with a retaining clip on both sides. Access is easy, so you shouldn't have any problems with this. At the very end, just the smallest hose from the EGR cooler, and we have all the components related to the water flow out of the way. The system is now closed. I am now filling the entire cooling system with the appropriate coolant and checking all connections thoroughly to make sure I haven't forgotten anything and that there are no leaks anywhere. If you have the opportunity to get under the car, this is the best time to do it. If everything is fine, I put the air intake duct back in its place, starting with positioning the lower part, and then I tighten both screws near the mass airflow sensor, and next, using exactly the same system we used to remove the serpentine belt, we will put it back in its place. I pull back the pulley responsible for tensioning the whole belt and try to position it properly. The belt is quite stiff, so it might be a bit harder for you the first time, but at some point, everything will click perfectly into place. Putting the second belt on is a breeze. Easy access and only 2 pulleys. Right after that, I drop in the radiator fan, making sure that it correctly clicks into its guides on the right and left sides, and I also connect both electrical plugs, trying not to bend those wires too much. Immediately after that, I put the intake duct back in its place near the throttle body, and at the very end, all that's left is to screw on the plastic radiator shroud elements and the front bracket, which you will definitely have no problem with. The final and most important element that cannot be skipped is properly bleeding the entire cooling system. If you don't do this according to the 3-step instructions, the water vapor pressure will blow out the gasket at the weakest point. During bleeding, you will definitely be surprised and terrified because the gasket will leak, but I will surely surprise you here. This is completely normal. As long as there is an air pocket within the thermostat area filling up with steam, it will escape through micro gaps between the metal gasket and the engine block. If you bleed the system properly and reach the correct engine operating temperature, the coating from our metal gasket will bond with the engine block via its polymer layer, and only this stage will complete the full sealing. Now don't mess this up and bleed the entire cooling system using this guide. Good luck!